Hello everyone, this is Huck. This is our 15-minute presentation for our work at Interspeech 2021, and we are honored to be part of the special section Privacy Preserving Machine Learning for Audio and Speech Processing. And it is a joint work between myself from Georgia Tech, Professor Sabato Marco from University Anna and NTNU, Norway, Professor Chin-Hui from Georgia Tech. In this work, we'll introduce how to incorporating a well-known and efficient differential private framework for speech processing. This framework is based on private aggregation of teacher ensembles, so-called PATE, and we're further incorporating a new training objective on latent code constraint by Adversarial Autoencoder, which can join, synthesize new speech data and provide privacy-preserving classification. So first, we can find out we do witness there is a new machine learning challenge under the new data regulation. For example, using customer data for training and avoid the model undergoing some membership inference and provide information production like identity. Furthermore, more like the model parameters production. And there's a new regulation coming out like the GDPR, California Customer Privacy Act, like CCPA. So incorporating either algorithm like differential private framework or system-wise approach to preserve the data privacy and design according algorithm become important issues. So in this work, we can find out when private budget has been used in some commercial system like the Apple Siri and provide a real differential private budget, like using epsilon of 8 in one of the official comments from Apple's report, which further motivate, is it possible to design a differential private framework for speech processing? So another challenge I want to highlight here, by having this unified differential privacy framework, we can further avoid some critical challenge like the model invention attack. Model invention attack is saying we have a pre-trained model and the attacker trying to find a specific output containing the training data. So they can starting with some random input vector and then train with this random input vector and gradually find out a random vector have a higher confidence to the target prediction. So eventually you can use the noise to recover part of the training data if the model highly rely on a part of training data. The same thing could be happening in audio if we use audio querying like gradually to recover the training data from a large-scale speech or acoustic model. But by having some kind of data protection or measurement technique, we can further quantize how difficult or if we can further prevent this kind of threat. As far as we know, they have different community working on this privacy preserving approach. So they can be system-wise or it can be algorithm. But in our speech processing community, so we focus on a new algorithm, but we also want this algorithm to become efficient in a speech processing system in the real world. So here is some quick takeaway of this work. So in this work, we introduced a new joint synthetic data, generative, and noise ensemble methods. So we call this method PATE-AAE, which is under the bounded and data-dependent differential private protection, which has been proved in previous reference from the first paper Connect Differential Privacy and Deep Learning in 2016, and the following PATE paper for image classification. But in this work, which is our very first empirical study, not be the first, but the only first, but we have to say they don't really have a lot of investigation between using these private aggregation teach on ensemble methods combined with large-scale acoustic modeling models. And by combining these two kind of requirement and the task, the proposed method show competitive result even under a really tight private budgets like epsilon equal to 0.1 or 0.01. Finally, we want to see by modifying part of the PATE architecture and introduce a adversarial autoencoder, we find out these methods showing some advantage for noise which come in, synthesize and join classification on the final prediction. So first, if you look at our work, we suppose there is some training data we want to protect. For example, this data contain identity information, gender information, age information. But for speech processing, it's hard to say there's any data is non-sensitive because voice is come from biological mechanism from our throat and our mouth. And then if we want to protect this kind of sensitive data, one way is to have a generative model. And then you can use this generative model to try to generate some fake data. Another process is we can use teacher models and to relabel this unlabeled data, which is fake data, and then trying to transfer some knowledge from the teachers model, like the sensitive, well-trained sensitive data to unlabeled data. So this process can be differential private because for each prediction of the teacher model, we can apply differential private noise. For example, Laplacian noise or Gaussian noise. And then benefit from this ensemble process, the final prediction declaration will be eliminated from this joint ensembles. So in this sense, the final student model will learn from this relabeled data and trying to leverage upon this large-scale training data, but further be randomized by this differential private mechanism. Even an attacker trying to curing the output from the student model is hardly to recover or target training data if there's any in our training set. So the PATE-AAE architecture can be think of saying we have an input data and we put this input data into autoencoder, and then this autoencoder will have a latent space vector. And then as a general autoencoder process, we're trying to reconstruct the data with a decoder. But in most of the autoencoder training setting, we didn't have constraint on latent space. But this time, we have a constraint on latent space by resampling a Gaussian distribution from a random variable and get eta. So we treat this eta as real and the latent vector as fake. Eventually, when this discriminator couldn't find out which one is the real Gaussian and which one is the latent vector. So eventually, when we have a 50-50 prediction probability, which means this latent vector could be really similar to this Gaussian distribution. And then, since this model has been updated end-to-end, all the model has been trained for both generative model and the classification model for the student model. So we can use a random variable eta, feed into the discriminator, and then use the encoder to to generate the final fake data for the relabeling process. And then the teacher model, the final ensemble output, will go over epsilon DP mechanism, which will undergoing some noise process, but eventually we can eliminate this importancy from this final prediction weight, but still preserving some information from this knowledge transfer process. So finally, the student model can be differential private benefit from this PATE training. So how this PATE AAE learning mechanism coming from? The first thing, we have a number of teachers and a number of output class. So you can set input X with M possible class to be a teacher's model like this. And then saying we have a random perturbation was introduced into the void count, or you can use another maximum mechanism in the following PATE paper by the GMA Max. But here just demonstrate a simple voting process, saying you introduce a certain void and a certain random variable, say the y lambda here. And then your prediction output should be noisy, but after you ensemble all the outputs, this declaration will be further illuminated. So this y could be a Laplace random variable, and this variable can equal to 1 divided by 2 epsilon. And then if we have a stronger noise, which means we have a small epsilon and a stronger privacy guarantee. And the PATE-AAE learning mechanism is also based on this AAE training. So we can find out AAE is trying to also incorporating the eta from the random variable. And then we empower this discriminator laws when we trying to train this teacher model. And then finally, this knowledge transfer will use this discriminator training formats and to train our student model. So in this sense, the autoencoder will be constrained by this discriminator training, and the student model will be also constrained by this discriminator training. But finally, the regression model will use the random variable for the final prediction, whether it's come from noisy or come from the latent space. And then you can use the noisy transfer methods with the relabel data for the final training on the student model. So the student model can still preserve some prediction power from the large-scale data, but it's hard to recover the data from Turing-based mechanism. So if we zoom in how this architecture look like, we can see, saying we have a row waveform. So first we pick out the MLCC feature, and then we can have our ResNet as feature interactor, and then go over some convolution, and then finally use the linear layer to predict this mean and variance to reconstruct the Z as a classic variational autoencoder process. But here, if we want to constrain the Z into Gaussian, we further sampling eta from the real Gaussian variable, and then we have a discriminator loss to let this Z and Gaussian hardly be distinguished. Finally, with some outsampling process, we go over 2 wavenet cycle and finally regenerate our sound by this random variable with a well-trained encoder. Decoder as a generator. So the training data we use is Google Speech Command version 2 with around 100,000 utterance of 35 words from around 2,600 speakers. For a student model, we use 20 to 100 student models and use XGBoost for ensemble learning. But here is some interesting result we find out. So if we have a strong privacy like requirement, for example, 0.01 and 0.1, the syntactic data quality from this FID score, so lower FID score, which means our regional data, the distribution is similar, distribution distance is similar to our original data. We can find out the PATE-AAE especially have a good synthetic data quality with a strong privacy requirement, which means a noisy condition. So in the spectrogram domain, we can also see PATE-AAE generates samples with more details and preserve more original features. Another takeaway we want to see is for most of the speech recognition or commercialized system, right now we can see we look at privacy between 1 to saying 20. But by incorporating PATE-AAE for speech domain classification, even there's a strong privacy requirement like 0.1 or 0.01, we can still preserving some reasonable prediction accuracy. For example, here is around 83 and here is around 88.6. So compare with some existing GAN-based, PATE-GAN-based and DP-GAN-based methods, still trying to incorporating the joint data syntactic and the classification learning. This PATE-AAE shows a really competitive result. Consider this confidence interval. Finally, some takeaway about this work. In this work, we apply data-dependent differential private learning algorithm for speech command recognition and attain good result on both data quality and the classification. And we design new ensemble methods with adversarial laws on the latent space, which is the adversarial autoencoder with PATE. And this method is one reason why we can attain this good result. And there is also some open questions to this domain. For example, how much differential private budget we actually need to deploy a speech processing system. We have to use a number already reported in the previous public document, or we have to really follow a strong statistical requirement like 0.01 using the probability measurement in the differential privacy community. So it's one of the open question to deploy a speech processing system consider the differential private requirement in GDPR or CCPA. Another question is, could we further apply PATE for continuous speech recognition? And finally, based on this ensemble experiment, we also find out the number of the teachers model also have a trade-off between how much teacher model we want to use, consider the data scalability, and consider the degradation of the noisy labels. So there could be another trade-off and depends on specific tasks in speech processing. And finally, I want to thank Dr. Vincent and Professor Sabato some feedback in the interspeech live learning discussions. And feel free to send me an email if you have any questions or feedback. And here's our reference related to this work. And hope you enjoy interspeech and take care. Bye-bye.